In the blood-red dust of the Arizona territory, a woman's needle was her only defense, until the day she found a man who was more ghost than human. He was Apache, left for dead, a man betrayed by his own. She was a seamstress, an outcast, a woman who knew what it was to be alone. By saving him, she signed her own death warrant. But she didn't just save a man's life. She gave him a reason to rise again. This isn't a story of the West you think you know. This is the story of the seamstress found an Apache left for dead, and the home he built in her name. The town of Coyote Point, Arizona Territory, was a place that mistook stubbornness for strength. It clung to the edge of the Dragoon Mountains like a dry burr on a coyote's pelt, all dust, splintered wood, and suspicious eyes. In this town lived Ella Thorne. Ella was the seamstress. She was not old, but she was treated as such, a permanent, unmoving fixture of the town, like the horse trough or the gallows. Her shop, Thorne's Fine Stitching, was at the very end of the street, where the pretense of civilization crumbled into the greasewood and alkali flat. She lived in a small, sturdy adobe house just behind it, separated from the town proper by 100 yards of heat-shimmering silence. This solitude was her armor. Ella was a woman of quiet, ferocious precision. Her hands, nimble and calloused, could thread a needle in the wind and set a suture as well as any doctor. She mended the coarse denim of the miners, stitched the Sunday finery for the cattle baron's wife, and, in quiet moments, embroidered delicate, impossible flowers onto scraps of silk. She was respected for her skill, but she was never invited. She was an unmarried woman, alone, and that made her either a target or invisible. She preferred invisible. The summer of 1878 was not just hot, it was vindictive. The monsoon had failed. The land was baked a cracked, pale terracotta. The crimson wash, a wide arroyo that bordered her property, was nothing but a scar of red sand and iron-rich rock, its name a cruel mockery of the water it lacked. It was in this wash, on a Tuesday so hot the lizards hid, that Ella's world tilted. She was gathering prickly pear fruit, her thick gloves and a long metal hook her only tools. The air was thick with a copper haze from a dust storm that had blown through the night before. She moved with her usual economy of motion, her eyes scanning the ground for snakes, when she saw it. It was not the glint of metal or a scrap of cloth. It was a disturbance in the dust, a dark shape huddled against the red rock wall of the wash, looking like a bundle of discarded rags. Her first instinct, born of the frontier, was to retreat. Nothing good was found in arroyos, but a sound, thin as a thread, snagged her. A groan. She approached, her hooking pole held out like a lance. The bundle of rags was a man. He was face down, his body a map of brutality. His back was a crisscross of fresh welts, but it was his head that made her stomach clench. He had been scalped. The wound was a horrific, weeping circle, caked with black blood and red sand. He wore the remnants of buckskin leggings and a torn calico shirt, a strange mix. He was Apache. A live Apache this close to town was a threat. A dead Apache was a bounty. A dying Apache was a problem Ella did not want. She nuded him with the pole. "Mister!" He groaned again, a deep, guttural sound of pure agony. He was alive. Barely. Ella Thorne stood frozen. She knew the laws of this land, written and unwritten. The Apache Wars were a fresh wound. General Crook was a name spoken with both fear and reverence. To harbor this man was not just charity, it was treason. It was a betrayal of her race, her town. They would hang her, or worse, Silas Croft's men would. She looked at the man, and then she looked at her hands. They were hands that mended, that pieced together the broken. She saw the wound on his head, and in her mind's eye, she saw not a savage, but a torn piece of complex fabric. Damnation, she whispered to the wind. She was not a large woman. He was. He was tall, even crumpled, with the long, wiry limbs of a runner. Dragging him would be impossible. She ran to her house, her mind racing faster than her feet. She grabbed her shotgun, an old, reliable double-barrel, and a wooden handcart she used for hauling firewood. She also grabbed her medical satchel, the one she used for her own injuries. It contained carbolic acid, her sharpest shears, and rolls of clean linen. Returning to the wash was an act of madness. Every shadow seemed to hold a watching eye. She rolled the man onto the cart. He was heavier than death. His head lolled. A small, worn leather pouch was looped around his neck. Without thinking, she tucked it under his shirt, hiding it. The 100-yard journey from the wash to her back door felt like 100 miles. The cart's wooden wheels screamed in the dirt. Every sound was a gunshot, every gust of wind a warning. She got him inside, onto the floor of her small storeroom, barricading the door not against him, but against the town. She lit a single lantern. His face was a mask of dried blood and dirt. He was younger than she first thought, perhaps 5 and 20. His features were strong, noble, even in this state. She cut away the filth-matted hair from the wound. It was worse than she'd feared. The scalp had been torn away, but the bone, thankfully, did not appear fractured. It was a bounty hunter's job, done in a hurry. They'd left him for dead. She cleaned it. She boiled her needles. He thrashed once, a sudden, violent surge of strength, his eyes snapping open. They were black, depthless, and filled with a pain so pure it was almost white. "Shh," she said, pressing him down with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "I am helping." He didn't understand the word, but he understood the tone. He went limp, not in surrender, but in exhaustion. For 2 hours, Ella Thorne, the seamstress of Coyote Point, stitched the flesh of a ghost. She worked with the same precise, tiny stitches she used for a wedding dress. She stitched his life back to his skull, closing the terrible wound as best she could. She bandaged him, fed him water, drop by drop, and then sat back on her heels, her dress stained with his blood, and trembled. She had just invited the world to come and kill her. The man on her floor was a secret that could burn her alive. For 3 days, the man was a phantom. He drifted in and out of a raging fever, his unconscious words, a river of guttural, clipped sounds that chilled Ella. She recognized the language, Monde, the tongue of the Chiricahua Apache. She kept the storeroom shuttered, the air thick with the scent of carbolic acid and sweat. She lived on a razor's edge. Every knock at her shop door was a jolt of panic. "Miss Thorne?" Ella froze, her hand on the storeroom latch. She composed her face, wiping the sweat from her brow, and opened the shop door. It was Deputy Finn. Finn was a man who enjoyed his uniform more than the law it represented. He was Silas Croft's creature, a man with a thin mustache and eyes that were always looking for an angle. He was holding a piece of paper. "Deputy," Ella said, her voice betraying nothing. "Miss Thorne, got a notice here. Mr. Croft is raising the bounty on Apache scalps, $5 more a head. Just letting the outlying properties know to be vigilant." "I am always vigilant, Deputy." Finn's eyes roamed her shop, lingering on the neat bolts of cloth, the pristine floor. "Heard a rumor you was out in the wash the other day, after the dust storm." Ella's heart hammered against her ribs. "I was gathering fruit, as I do every week. Was that against the law?" "Just be careful," Finn said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We're hunting a small band that broke off from the reservation. Nasty ones. We discouraged one of them a few days back, but his friends might come looking. We discouraged one of them. Ella looked at Finn's belt. A fresh, dark stain, poorly scrubbed, marked the leather near his hip. She felt sick. "I've seen no one," she said. "Good." He tipped his hat. "Mr. Croft appreciates a tidy town. Best to keep things tidy." He left. Ella leaned against the door, her knees weak. We discouraged one of them. Finn was one of the men who had done this. He had been back, perhaps to see if the body was still there. Had he seen her cart tracks? She returned to the storeroom. The man's eyes were open. They were clear. He watched her, his gaze unblinking, like a hawk's. There was no gratitude in it, only a cold, assessing intelligence. He was calculating. "Water," she said, holding up a tin cup. He said nothing. She set it down just within his reach and retreated. She sat on a stool in the corner, her shotgun across her lap. They stayed like that for an hour. Finally, with a pained, slow-motion movement, he reached for the cup. He drank. "My name is Ella," she said, pointing to her chest. "Ella Thorne." He just watched. The next day, she brought him a bowl of thin broth. He had managed to sit up against the wall. He was still weak, but the fever had broken. His eyes followed her every move. "You need to eat," she said. He spoke, his voice a dry rasp. "Datede." "I don't understand." He pointed to his mouth, then to the broth. He was asking if it was food. When she nodded, he took the bowl. He ate with a desperate, animal-like speed that was nonetheless precise, spilling nothing. The healing was a tense, silent negotiation. She would clean his wound, he would endure it, his body rigid as ironwood. She learned to read his movements. A slight tensing of his jaw meant agonizing pain. A flicker of his eyes toward the door meant he was listening. One evening, a week after she found him, she was checking the bandage. His hair, what was left of it, was thick and black. The wound was healing, her stitches holding. He moved so fast she didn't even see it. His hand shot out, not to her, but to the shears on her supply tray. He had them in his grasp, the point aimed at her throat, before she could even gasp. They were frozen. His face was inches from hers. The blackness of his pupils seemed to swallow the lantern light. He was a coiled snake, ready to strike. He was testing her. Ella did not scream. She did not flinch. She locked her eyes with his and held her ground. She was terrified, but she was also angry. After all she had done, this. "I stitched that wound," she said, her voice low and steady. "I used my best silk thread, the same I would use on a governor's suit. You bleed on my floor, and I will be very unhappy." He did not understand the words, but he understood the iron in her voice. He saw no fear in her eyes, only a bone-deep weariness and an offense that ran deeper than fear. Slowly, very slowly, he'd lowered the shears. He placed them back on the tray. He touched his own chest. "Taza," he said. "Taza," she repeated. He then pointed at her. "Ella." It was the first bridge, a fragile thread across a chasm of blood. The next day, a new crisis. Doc Holloway's wife, a portly woman who fancied herself the queen of Coyote Point, needed a dress fitted. Doc Holloway himself came by to check on the progress. "Miss Thorne, a moment," he called from the shop. Ella, her blood turning to ice, quickly barred the storeroom door. "One moment, doctor." She went out, smoothing her apron. "Dr. Holloway, Mrs. Holloway's dress is nearly ready." "Yes, splendid." Holloway was a good man, but a weak one, terrified of Silas Croft and his own wife. He fidgeted. I just wanted to purchase some of your fine thread. My sutures. Well, the ones from St. Louis are coarse. As he spoke, a sound came from the back, a dull, heavy thud. Taza. He had fallen. Holloway's head snapped up. What was that? Sounded like it came from your storeroom. It's the wind, Ella said, her heart leaping into her throat. This old house, it's settling. Sounded heavier than wind. Holloway, his curiosity piqued, took a step toward the back. You're not harboring. Well, you know. There's been talk of stray dogs, or worse. Doctor, I assure you, Ella said, stepping in his path. It is nothing. Now, about that thread. I have a new spool of silk. It's expensive, but it's strong. She was diverting him, her mind screaming. Holloway looked at her, then at the barred door, then back at her. He saw the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her hand. He was a doctor. He was trained to see symptoms, and he saw a woman lying, badly. Another, softer sound. A scrape. Holloway held her gaze. He knew, or he suspected, which was just as bad. He knew Ella Thorne. He knew her solitude, her pride. He also knew what Finn would do to her. Ah, he said, clearing his throat. Yes. The silk. That would be excellent. I'll take 2 spools. Put it on my account. He turned and walked out of the shop, his pace quicker than when he had entered. He didn't look back. Ella locked the shop door, her entire body shaking. Holloway wouldn't tell. Not yet. But he was a coward. If pressed, he would break. She ran to the storeroom. Taza was on the floor, his face pale with pain. He had tried to stand, to reach the water bucket, and had collapsed. You fool, she hissed, helping him up. He was all muscle and bone. You must be silent. He looked at her, his face grim. He pointed to the door. Chenal, he whispered. Man. Yes, a man, a white man, a doctor. He heard you. Taza understood. He pushed her hand away, his strength returning. He sat up on his own. He looked at the barred door, and Ella saw a new expression in his eyes. It wasn't just survival. It was the look of a prisoner calculating his escape. And she had a terrible thought. She wasn't just hiding him from the town. She was hiding the town from him. Weeks bled into 2 months. The oppressive heat of summer began to crack, giving way to the cool, sharp nights of autumn. Taza was no longer a patient. He was a presence. His healing was astonishing. The Apache resilience was not a myth. He moved with a silence that unnerved Ella. She would turn from her sewing machine, and he would simply be there, watching her, his arms crossed. The wound on his head had scarred over, a pale, puckered circle that he ignored. He began to work. He didn't ask. He simply saw what was broken and fixed it. Her woodpile, usually a chaotic jumble, became a perfectly stacked work of art. The rickety hinge on her back door was reinforced with a strip of tin. He used her tools with an innate, careful understanding of their purpose. Their language was a patchwork. He taught her Apache words for water, food, and danger. She taught him English, needle, thread, house, friend. He paused at that word. Friend, he repeated. He looked at her. Ella. Friend. One evening, he was sitting at her small kitchen table, cleaning her shotgun with a terrifying efficiency. Where? Home? She asked, pointing to him, then gesturing to the mountains. He grew very still. His eyes, usually so present, became distant. My people, Chiricahua, are hidden. He paused, searching for the word. A place of safety. We were moving. Why did they... Finn, hurt you? Taza set the gun barrel down. He looked at his hands. I was a scout, for the ND, for the soldiers, both. This was a shock. You worked for the army? I showed them the empty places. I kept them from my people. It was a lie, a game. His English was growing stronger, patched together from her lessons and the words he must have known before. They trusted me. Finn. Croft. Silas Croft? Ella felt a cold dread. He is a white-eye chief. He wanted the land, always more land. Tarza's voice dropped to a low, dangerous rumble. They hired me to find water, a new spring. For cattle, I found it. And you told them? No. A faint, grim smile touched his lips. I told them the land was dry. I told them to go. South. Away from it. He reached inside his shirt. He still had the small leather pouch she had tucked away. He hadn't opened it in her presence until now. He emptied its contents onto the table. It was not gold. It was not jewelry. It was a folded, brittle piece of parchment. A map. It was old, Spanish, marked with the sign of a cross. The map to the mission. From the old ones. He pointed to a spot on the map, a convergence of lines in a tight canyon. Covenant Creek, the soldiers, the Jesuits, they wrote it down. Water that never stops, even in the drought. Covenant Creek, Ella whispered. She'd heard the name, an old haunted place no one went. I found this map on a dead man, a soldier. Months ago, I kept it. When Croft hired me, I knew this was the place he was looking for. This is the life of my people. The spring is hidden. Only this map shows the true path. So you lied to them. Yes, but Finn, he is Coyote. He watched me. He did not believe. He followed me. Tarza's face darkened. He and two others, they found me. They said I was a liar. They demanded the map. I refused. He didn't need to describe the fight. The welts on his back, the horrific wound on his head, were his testament. They took nothing, Tarza said, his hand closing over the map. I played dead. I let them win. I hid the map. They left me. For the buzzards. Ella finally understood. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a conspiracy. Croft, the most powerful man in the territory, was hunting for this spring. It was the key to his entire empire. In a land without water, the man who controlled the spring controlled everything, and Tarza was the only one who stood in his way. A new noise outside broke the silence. Not a knock, a scraping. Tarza was on his feet in an instant, the shotgun in his hands, blending into the shadows of the room. Ella's heart pounded. She peered through the edge of the curtain. A single figure, a woman, was at her shop door. She wasn't knocking. She was leaving something. Ella waited until the shadow retreated, then opened the door. On her stoop was a basket. Inside was a bottle of whiskey, a small sack of flour, and a piece of velvet. Tucked inside was a note. They're talking. Croft's men. Be careful. S. Ella knew the handwriting. S. Sadie. A saloon girl from the Golden Nugget. A woman whose torn dresses Ella had been mending for years, often for free. Sadie was the only person in town who saw Ella as a woman, and not a fixture. They're talking. Ella brought the basket inside. Tarza looked at the items. Who? A friend, Ella said, her voice shaking. She warns me. The town. They suspect. Tarza looked at her, his face unreadable in the dim light. You are in danger. Because of me. We are in danger, she corrected him, her voice hardening. She was a seamstress. She knew how to tie a knot that would not break. She had tied herself to this man. They will come back, Tarza said. It was not a question. Finn, he knows I was here. He gestured to the wash. He knows I am not dead. What do we do? Ella asked. Tarza looked at the map. He looked at her. He wants the water. He wants me dead. He wants this house, this land. He was right. Her small property was a strategic bottleneck, bordering the very pass that led toward the Covenant Creek area. "We do not—" "Wait," Taza said. He picked up the shotgun. "This is not enough. I need a bow. I need steel." "I have steel," Ella said. She went to her workshop and returned with her heaviest shears. "And this." She pulled a long, thick needle, an upholsterer's needle, from her kit. Taza looked at the shears, testing their weight. He looked at the needle. He nodded. "Good," he said. He walked to her back window, which overlooked the dark expanse of the wash. "Tonight, Inda, the white man comes." He was no longer Taza, the patient. He was Taza, the warrior. He was the ghost of Covenant Creek, and he was about to show Silas Croft and Deputy Finn what it meant to try and kill something that did not want to die. The attack Taza predicted didn't come that night, or the next. Croft was more subtle than that. He was a rancher, and he knew how to cut a cow from the herd before the slaughter. He started with Ella's name. The whispers began in the general store, amplified in the Golden Nugget, and solidified into gospel at the Sunday church service Ella never attended. It started with Mrs. Pratchett, the banker's wife, who had been waiting 3 weeks for a new silk dress. She cornered Doc Holloway. "Doctor," she said, her voice a piercing whine. "You've seen Miss Thorne. Is she unwell? She hasn't answered her door in a week." Doc Holloway, remembering the thud from the storeroom, paled. She is busy. A large order, I believe." "Busy? Or entertaining?" This came from Jed, one of Croft's hands, who was loitering by the Cracker Barrel. "Heard some strange tracks down by the wash, near her place." The town, bored and fearful, seized on the gossip like a starved dog on a bone. Ella Thorne, the quiet seamstress. Why was she so solitary? Why did she buy so much lye? For soap, but the gossips implied it was to scrub blood. Why did Sadie, the saloon girl, leave her charity baskets? They must be in league. The shift was palpable. When Ella finally ventured into town for flour and salt, the street fell silent. The women who used to nod now crossed to the other side. Mrs. Pratchett, seeing her, gathered her skirts as if Ella were covered in filth. "Miss Thorne," she sniffed. "We were so worried. You look peaked." "I am well, Mrs. Pratchett. Your dress will be ready on Friday." "Oh, I don't think so," the woman said, her eyes darting to Deputy Finn, who was watching from the assay office. I've made other arrangements. My husband feels it unseemly to conduct business with— Well, good day." She hurried away. Ella stood alone, the whispers a physical force around her. Indian lover. The word was never spoken aloud, but it hung in the air, as thick and foul as chimney smoke. She lost all her business. One by one, her customers cancelled their orders. The rancher's wife, the banker's wife, even the miners stopped bringing their mending. Only Sadie remained loyal. She came one night, long after dark, tapping on the window. Ella let her in, and Sadie's eyes went wide. Taza was in the corner, sharpening a long knife he had fashioned from a broken piece of Ella's wagon spring. "Saints and sinners," Sadie breathed, her painted face pale. "It's true." "Sadie, this is Taza," Ella said simply. I don't care if he's the man in the moon," Sadie said, her voice shaking. "Ella, you gotta get out. Croft knows. He's just marinating you. He's turning the town. He wants them to let him do whatever he's gonna do." "Do to what? To run you out, or worse. He told my boss, that Seamstress's land is a blight, and it's sitting on the pass. I aim to cleanse it." "He can't just take my land," Ella said, but the words sounded hollow. "He can if the town wants you gone," Sadie said. tears welling in her eyes. He'll say you're harboring a hostile. He'll say you're a danger. They'll form a citizens' committee, and Finn will be the one holding the rope. Sadie pressed a small bag of coins into her hand. This is all I got. Take it. Go. Go to Tucson. I am not leaving, Ella said. Taza, who had understood the tone, if not all the words, stepped forward. Sadie is friend. You. Go. No, Ella said, looking not at Sadie but at Taza. This is my home. You think I don't know what it is to be unwanted. I've been the town spinster, the odd Miss Thorne, my entire life. They ignored me. Now they hate me. It is louder. That is the only difference. Sadie looked at the two of them, the pale, defiant seamstress and the scarred Apache warrior. You're both insane, she whispered. God help you. She slipped out the door, a ghost returning to the shadows. The next morning it happened. Ella woke to the sound of breaking glass. A rock, the size of a fist, had been thrown through her shop window. She ran out. It was not just the window. Her front door, the one to her shop, was painted. In crude, dripping red letters, the words shone in the morning light. Apache whore. Ella stared at it. The word was a brand, a scarlet A for all the world to see. She felt a cold, clarifying rage build inside her. They had taken her name, her business. Now they were defacing her home. She heard a movement. Taza was standing behind her. He looked at the words. He looked at the broken window. He looked at the neighbors, who were peering from behind their curtains, their faces a mix of fear and smug righteousness. Ella expected Taza to be angry. She expected him to be violent. Instead, he walked past her. He went to the woodpile and picked up a heavy piece of firewood. He walked to the front of her shop, where a large, potted yucca sat. He ignored it. He walked past her shop, toward the main street. Taza, no! Ella hissed, running after him. He ignored her. He walked directly to the Golden Nugget, where Finn, Jeb, and Cole, Croft's men, were sitting on the porch, drinking morning coffee, laughing. They saw him. Their laughter died. Their hands went to their guns. Taza didn't slow. He was unarmed, save for the log in his hand. He walked with a purpose that was terrifying. He walked right up to the porch. Finn stood, his hand on his revolver. Well, looky here, Finn sneered, his voice unsteady. The dead walk. Taza stopped 3 feet from him. He looked at Finn. He looked at Jeb and Cole. He held up the log. Then, in a single, fluid motion, he threw the log. It didn't hit Finn. It sailed past his head and smashed through the front window of the Golden Nugget Saloon, exploding in a shower of glass and splintered wood. The street went dead silent. Taza pointed at the saloon's broken window. Then he pointed at Ella's broken window. Then he pointed at Finn. He said one word. Even. He turned, his back to the 3 armed men, and walked calmly back to Ella's house. It was the most profound act of defiance the town had ever seen. He had not started a fight. He had finished one. He had balanced the scales, publicly. Finn was too stunned and too cowardly to shoot a man in the back in front of the whole town. Not yet. Ella watched Taza walk. He had risen again. He had just declared war. She went back to her shop. She did not scrub the paint off her door. She left it. Let them see it. She got her needle and thread, and she began to stitch a heavy canvas over her broken shop window. Her hands didn't shake. The whisper campaign was over. The siege was about to begin. The red paint on Ella's door was a declaration of war. Taza's reply, the log through the Nugget's window, was the first shot. For 2 days, Coyote Point held its breath. The town was a powder keg, and Silas Croft was holding the match. He didn't wait long. On the 3rd night, the moon was a sliver, offering just enough light to see the shadows move. Inside the small adobe house, there was no light. Ella and Taza were waiting. They had eaten a cold meal of jerky and biscuits. The shotgun was loaded, leaning by the front door. Ella's original shotgun was in her hands, loaded with buckshot. Taza held his new bow, crafted from a seasoned piece of juniper, and a quiver of arrows he had fletched with hawk feathers. His wagon spring knife was in his boot. "They will come from the wash," Taza whispered. He stood near the back window, an opening that was now barricaded with Ella's heavy sewing table. "They think we are stupid." "We are not," Ella said, her voice tight. She was stationed at the front window, peering through a small gap in the shutters. The first sound was the crunch of a boot on gravel. Not from the wash, from the front, from the town. "They are splitting," Ella breathed. "Finn is Coyote," Taza agreed. "He sends two to the front. He and one more come from the back." A loud bang echoed from the front of the shop. "Ella Thorne, we know you're in there. We're citizens' arrest. Come on out and bring the redskin." It was Jeb's voice, slurred with whiskey and false courage. "They want us to look front," Taza whispered. He moved, silent as smoke, to the back door. Ella stayed at the front window. "Go to hell, Jeb," she shouted, surprised at the strength in her own voice. Another bang, this time the wood of her door splintering. They were using a log as a ram. Crash. The back door exploded inward. Finn and Cole, the third man, burst in, their guns up, expecting to catch Taza from behind. They found nothing. The room was empty. "Where is he?" Finn snarled, kicking over the small table. From the darkest corner of the ceiling, Taza dropped. He landed directly on Cole's back, like a panther. The thud of their impact was sickening. Taza's knife flashed once, a silver arc in the moonlight from the broken door. Cole made a wet, choking sound, and collapsed, his pistol firing harmlessly into the floor. Finn, turning, fired his revolver. The muzzle flash was blinding, the bang deafening in the small room. The bullet tore a chunk of adobe from the wall where Taza had been. Taza was already moving, rolling behind the overturned sewing table. At the front, the main door burst open. Jeb and the fourth man, a drifter named Pike, stumbled in. "Finn! We're—" Ella, who had moved from the window to the doorway, fired her shotgun. The blast was catastrophic. It caught Jeb square in the chest, sending him flying backward out of the house, dead before he hit the dirt. Pike, spattered with his companion's blood, screamed and dived for cover behind a wooden chest. 4 attackers. In 10 seconds, 2 were dead. The house was filled with acrid smoke. "Finn!" Pike screamed from the front room. "I'm hit! I think I'm hit!" "Shut up!" Finn roared from the back. He was trapped behind the table. Taza was somewhere in the dark, a phantom with a knife. "Show yourself, you coward!" Finn yelled, firing again into the shadows. An arrow thunked into the table, inches from his face. Ella, meanwhile, was reloading. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't fumble. She slotted 2 new shells into the breech. Pike was whimpering. "Please, Miss Thorne, I'm just tired. I don't want this." "Then get out!" Ella yelled. Pike scrambled to his feet, holding his arm, and ran for the door. He fled into the night. Now it was 2. Ella in the front room, Taza and Finn in the back. "It's just you and me, savage!" Finn yelled. He kicked over the table and charged, firing his last 2 shots. Taza met the charge. He didn't use his knife. He used the bow, horizontally, as a club, striking Finn's gun hand. Bones snapped. The revolver clattered to the floor. Finn roared in pain and lunged, his good hand grabbing Taza's throat. They crashed against the wall, 2 men locked in a brutal, silent struggle. Finn was bigger. heavier. Tarza was faster. Ella ran in, leveling her shotgun. "Get off him!" She couldn't get a clear shot. They were a knot of desperate, struggling limbs. Finn saw her. He grinned, his teeth red in the moonlight. "The whore comes to save him." He slammed Tarza's head against the adobe wall. Tarza grunted, his grip weakening. Finn pushed off him, shoving Tarza to the ground, and lunged for Ella. He was going for the shotgun. "I'll kill you both." Tarza, on the floor, his head bleeding, didn't try to stand. He grabbed the one tool he had that Finn had forgotten. Ella screamed as Finn's hand closed on the barrel of her gun. Tarza grabbed the leg of the cast-iron stove. With a final, desperate surge of strength, he pulled. The stove, laden with a pot of water, was unsteady. It tipped. It fell, crashing down onto Deputy Finn, pinning his legs. A cascade of glowing hot coals spilled across his chest. The scream Finn let out was not human. It was a sound from hell. He was trapped, and he was burning. Ella and Tarza scrambled back as the flames licked at the man's clothes. The smell of burning flesh filled the room. "Tarza!" Ella choked, horrified. Tarza grabbed her, pulling her away. "It is done." He looked at the writhing, screaming man, his face a mask of cold, hard justice. This was the man who had scalped him. This was the man who had left him for dead. They stood outside, breathing in the cold night air as the screams from the house faded. The front of the house, where the coals had scattered, began to catch fire. "The house!" Ella whispered, watching the flames lick her door. My home! It is not home," Tarza said, his voice raw. He grabbed her arm. "Not now. We go to Covenant Creek. We finish this before Croft finishes us." He pulled her away from the burning house, away from the dead, and into the darkness of the Crimson Wash. They were no longer defenders. They were hunters. The high desert at night is another world. They moved through the labyrinthine canyons of the Dragoons, Tarza leading, Ella following. He set a brutal pace. He knew they were being hunted. The fire at Ella's homestead was a beacon. Croft would send everyone he had. Ella was not a frontier woman in this way. She was a town woman. Her feet, in her thin leather shoes, were rubbed raw within the first hour. Her lungs burned, but she did not complain. She watched Tarza. He moved like a spirit, his feet seeming to find purchase on stones that should have rolled, his body blending into the moonlight. He was in his element. "Here," he said, stopping after hours of climbing. He pulled her into a crevice between two towering boulders. "We rest. Wait for sun." Ella collapsed, her body trembling. "They're dead. I killed a man, Tarza." Tarza sat beside her. He looked at her hands, the seamstress's hands, now blistered and dirty. He took them in his own. His were hard as stone. "You fought," he said. "You lived. That is the law here." He looked up at the stars. "My people, they are at the creek. They are waiting for me. This map," he touched the pouch at his neck, "is their life." "Croft will be there," she said. "Yes, he lost his dogs. Now the wolf comes himself." They rested for 2 hours. When the first hint of grey light touched the horizon, they moved again. The terrain became brutal, a landscape of ocotillo and waiting thorns. Tarza showed her how to find water in a barrel cactus, how to walk without leaving a clear trail. She was a quick study. Her precision, her meticulousness, it translated from fabric to survival. After 2 days of walking, they reached a high ridge. Tarza put up his hand, signaling a halt. He crept forward, peering down into a hidden box canyon. This was it. Covenant Creek. Ella joined him. She expected to see a hidden Apache rancheria, smoke from campfires, the sound of horses. She saw only stillness and ash. "No," Taza whispered. The canyon was burned. The small patch of cottonwoods that must have lined the spring was a grove of black, skeletal trunks. The ground was charred. Taza ran down the slope, Ella stumbling after him. He fell to his knees in the center of the clearing. It was an abandoned camp. There were signs of a struggle, a broken olla, a child's doll, half burned. "They were here," Taza said, his voice breaking. He was too late. Croft had found them. Ella looked around, her heart sinking. "Taza, look." He followed her gaze. There, on the edge of the clearing, were 3 fresh graves, simple mounds of rock. "My brother," Taza choked, touching one of the mounds. "Chaco, my sister. They are gone." He had risen from the dead. He had fought his way back, all to protect a spring and a people who were already gone. The fight drained out of him. He knelt, a man made of stone, and put his head in his hands. The silent grief was more terrible than any scream. Ella put her hand on his shoulder. "I am so sorry." He stayed like that for a long time. The sun beat down on the canyon of death. Ella, giving him his moment, walked the perimeter. She was looking for something, anything, a clue, and she found it. Trawled in the dirt, half hidden by a bush, was a single, perfect arrow. It was stuck in the ground, pointing away from the canyon toward the high peaks. The fletching was distinct, black and white. "Taza," she said gently, holding it out. Is this Chaco's?" Taza looked up, his eyes dead. He saw the arrow. His focus snapped back. "Yes," he said, taking it. He examined it. This is not from a fight," he pointed. "This is a sign, a trail marker for me." He stood, his grief turning back into that cold, hard fire. "They are not dead. The graves." He kicked one. The rock scattered, revealing nothing but disturbed earth. "They are lies. A trick for Croft." He looked at the spring. The source was a small cave in the rock face. The water was still flowing, pooling in a basin before sinking into the charred earth. "They knew Croft was coming," Taza reasoned, his mind working fast. "They burned the camp themselves. They left the false graves. They ran to the high places." He pointed with the arrow to the east. A new sound, the jingle of a harness, the lowing of cattle. "He's here," Ella said. Taza grabbed her, pulling her into the rocks. "The spring. He comes for the water." Down the main canyon trail, Silas Croft rode. He was not a deputy. He was a king. He wore a fine black coat, and he was flanked by a dozen new men, hard cases from Tucson. Behind them, a huge herd of cattle was being pushed into the canyon. "This is it, boys," Croft boomed, his voice echoing. "The Covenant. We'll have a pump on that spring by nightfall. Divert it all. This canyon will be the heart of my new range." He dismounted, walking to the spring. He dipped a cup in and drank. The taste of victory. He saw the false graves. Looks like Finn and his boys did some good. Cleared the nest for us. Shame they didn't check in. Taza watched, his face a mask of hate. He poisons it with his cows. "We can't fight them," Ella whispered. "There are too many." "No," Taza said. "We do not fight. We hunt." He looked up. The cattle were thirsty, pushing into the canyon, bottlenecking. Above them, on the canyon wall, was a wide shelf of loose rock and dry brush. Taza looked at Ella. "Fire. You have matches?" She checked her pockets. She still had her small sewing kit. and inside it a tin of matches. "They want water," Taza said, a grim smile on his face. "We give them fire." They scrambled up the rocks, staying out of sight, until they were on the ledge directly above the herd. Croft was barking orders, his men setting up a camp. Taza gathered a huge bundle of dry greasewood. He placed it at the edge of the shelf. "Now." Ella struck the match. The tinder-dry brush went up with a whoosh. Taza and Ella pushed the blazing bundle. It rolled down the slope, a ball of fire, landing directly in the middle of the parched, terrified cattle. The effect was instantaneous. The herd, already on edge, panicked. They turned, stampeding away from the fire, back up the canyon, directly toward Croft and his new camp. It was chaos. Men shouted. Horses screamed. The river of terrified cattle, 1,000 strong, smashed through the camp. Tents, supplies, and men were trampled. Croft, screaming in rage, was thrown from his horse. He landed hard, his leg buckling under him. In the smoke and dust, Taza and Ella descended. Croft saw them, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You, the dead Morn, and the whore!" He fumbled for his pistol. Taza put an arrow in his shoulder, pinning his arm to the dirt. Croft screamed. Taza walked up to him. He stood over the cattle baron, the man who had ordered his death, who had destroyed his camp. He pulled the Spanish map from his pouch. "This map," Taza said, "is mine. This water is mine. This land is not yours." He tore the map in half, then in quarters, and threw the pieces onto Croft's chest. "A map is paper," Taza said. "I am the map. I am the ghost. You will leave, or I will bury you in a real grave." Croft, his empire shattered, his men scattered, his body broken, could only stare up in hatred. Taza turned. He took Ella's hand. "Come, we go. Find my family." They left Silas Croft to be found by his surviving men. A broken king in a canyon of ash, they walked out of Covenant Creek, not as victims, but as victors. The aftermath was a changing of the wind. Silas Croft, his leg permanently crippled, and his reputation in tatters, lost his hold on the territory. The stampede, which the town attributed to a freak brush fire, had wiped out his herd. He was ruined. When Doc Holloway, finally finding his courage, rode out to Ella's burned-out homestead and found the bodies of Finn and his men, the story wrote itself. Finn and his gang had attacked the Seamstress, and the hostiles they were hunting had intervened. Ella Thorne was never accused of a crime, but she was also never welcomed back. The town, ashamed of its own complicity, simply erased her. Her name was not spoken. Her burned-out lot was left to the weeds. Ella and Taza never returned to Coyote Point. Taza, following the trail Chaco had left, found his people. They were hidden deep in the Chiricahua Mountains, safe and whole. He was welcomed back as a hero, a man who had returned from the spirit world. Ella stayed with them for a time. She was treated with a quiet, profound respect. Chaco, Taza's brother, called her "she who stitches the sky," for she had mended the hole in their world. But it was not her home, and Taza, she realized, was no longer fully at home there either. He had been Taza, the Apache. He had been the patient on her floor. Now he was something new. He had risen, but he had risen different. After a season, he came to her as she sat mending a blanket. "You are not Ndé," he said gently. "I am not white. We are not them." "No," she said, not looking up. "We are not. I cannot. Stay here," he said, "and you cannot. Stay. But I will not leave you. Never." "Where do we go?" she asked. He pointed, back toward the dragoons. To our place. They left. Not to Coyote Point, but to the land that was hers, the burned-out shell of her adobe house. It was on a small rise, overlooking the Crimson Wash. The townspeople called it Thorn Hill. They began to build. Tarza did not want to use the old adobe, which held the ghosts of the fire. He went to the Crimson Wash and began to quarry the heavy, red, iron-rich stone. He used no mortar. He was Apache. He knew how to build a wall that stood by fitting the stones together, a perfect, tight puzzle. Ella, the seamstress, drew the plans. She needed light. She needed defenses. It took them 2 years. They worked alone. They were a self-contained world. He would hunt. She would tend her garden. And every day they would build. The house he built was a fortress. It was a fusion of 2 worlds. It was built low and strong, like an Apache wickiup, but it was made of permanent stone. The walls were 3 feet thick, cool in the summer, warm in the winter. The windows were narrow, like arrow slits, on 3 sides. But on the 4th side, the one facing the mountains, Tarza built what Ella had demanded, a large glass window. It had cost every cent of Sadie's coin, hauled from Tucson. It was a seamstress's window, a place for her to do her fine stitching in the bright, clear light. The people of Coyote Point, riding by, would see the house rising from the red rock. It was a marvel. It was a scar. It was a testament. It was the house on Thorn Hill, built by the ghost and the seamstress. They lived there for 40 years. They never had children. They were, themselves, a complete unit. They were the seamstress and the man who rose. He taught her the secrets of the mountains. She taught him to read Shakespeare. When Ella Thorne died, Tarza buried her on the hill, under a lone juniper. He did not build a grave of rocks. He carved a simple wooden marker. Ella, my friend. He lived in that stone house for another decade, a solitary, silent guardian of her memory. The town never bothered him. He was a legend, a piece of the landscape. When he finally died, he was found by a passing traveler, sitting in his chair, facing the large window, as if waiting for the seamstress to look up from her work. The house still stands. The wind blows through the stone walls, but they do not fall. It is not a monument to a battle or to a cattle baron. It is a home built in her name, a permanent, defiant stitch in the savage fabric of the West. They say the West was won by iron and steel, but maybe it was saved by a needle and thread. The story of Ella Thorne and Tarza isn't just a legend. It's a reminder that courage isn't about the fight you pick, but the life you choose to save, and the home you build in its name. They were 2 outcasts from 2 different worlds who found their own world in each other. If this story of survival, drama, and defiance touched your heart, please help us keep these hidden histories alive. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a true story of the Old West, and subscribe for more tales of the forgotten frontier. Thank you for watching.